I became essential, and then when the uprising started, I became relevant, and I just don't know what I'm going to do with all these adjectives.
You're the only comic who's like, I have so much material right now.
Oh, man.
That is amazing.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Black Card Rehab, the show where we go from 0 to black, one episode at a time. I am joined by my white friend Paige.
Hello.
Hey Paige. Hi. On a scale of 0 to black, how are you feeling today?
I am feeling Chi-Chi DeVane, the Bayou Queen today.
Okay.
Hero of many a season of Drag Race. She is a craft queen. She ate her own earring one time. I love her to death. She's the best in the world. Love it. Absolutely love it.
That's so funny. I was like, wait, what? Oh, yes. The topic. Okay.
And Crystal, on a scale of 0 to African American, how are you feeling today?
Okay, so I am feeling Olivia Pope because did I tell this story the other week about how I had gotten this email from Pizza Hut? Did I tell you this story? Okay, so I got an email from Pizza Hut saying that my pizza was on the way, and an ordinary person would have just been like, "No, I don't. This is spam." But not me. I was like, I'm about to get to the bottom of this.
Or
and
get
so
some
what
free
I
pizza.
did, so I went into the Pizza Hut website, forgot my password, changed the password, and then got the details, and then found the phone number of the person who placed said pizza. And I called her and I was like, this is maybe weird, but did you just order a pizza recently? And she goes, actually, yes, I did. And I go, we probably have the same first and last name. Is your name Crystal Adams? She's like, yes, it is.
What?
Yeah. And I was like, okay, I think you maybe like misspelled something in your email address or something, because mine is crystaladams@gmail.com. What's your email? She's like, well, mine, I guess I'm not going to say it, but she basically had flipped some stuff around. And so I was like, oh, yeah. So she's like, yeah, I think you put my email address as a mistake. And I got the email that your pizza's on it. She was like, woo, are you serious, girl?
I frankly am shocked that you called another woman named Crystal Adams and got another black woman.
In Texas.
What?
Yeah.
Wild.
In Texas. It was very fun. We had a great little 10-minute conversation. But I fucking cracked the code, and I got to the bottom of it. You know what? Justice and pizza for all. Okay, that's what I have to say.
Absolutely, agreed.
So, yes, I think that's good for a start. I'm very excited to have our next guest on. She is a hilarious stand-up comedian, writer. She has a podcast called Living with Jonathan and Katy. It's either Jonathan or Katy, right? Who's about to be on this podcast. Katy French, welcome to the podcast.
Yay!
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, and this is momentous because this is truly, myself included, this is, I think, the whitest this podcast has ever been.
I was going to say, I was like, I'm your second white friend. So glad to be giving a voice to the Black community through white women, which is so needed right now. I do feel very honored, especially in these times. So thank you so much.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And truly a voice. I'm very excited because I think your voice isn't necessary. I think your voice is irrelevant. But I'm very excited to learn about this next thing, which actually I know both you and Paige know a lot about. I shouldn't say thing. It's like a way of life.
Yes.
They are a way of life of
a cultural tour de force.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. You're here to tell us who you're here to talk to us today about.
I am here to talk about Miss RuPaul Andre Charles.
Yeah.
Yes.
The king queen of Drag Race. Which is important to distinguish that we're not talking about just Drag Race. We're talking about RuPaul specifically, the guru of us all. And to be honest, it's good that we're talking about it because I've heard so many people complain that white women are like the biggest consumers of Drag Race. And how, so we are, I guess I have the most authority to speak on it, I guess.
We're going to get so canceled.
I know.
They're just going to write
so
think pieces. They're going to be like, first they never let Latrice win, and then this.
And then, I know, I'm so sorry for ruining the kingdom. No, well, Crystal had asked me who I want to talk about, and I was like, this is the person I love and like so much,
Yes.
And to be honest, I'm surprised, Crystal, you said like you didn't know that much about RuPaul.
Yeah, I don't know that much. And I think part of it is because, I don't know what it is about like, that there's not a lot of the Black community that is consuming Drag Race and drag culture. That overall is very surprising to me. I don't know all of the ins and outs of that besides like, probably like internalized misogyny and just the patriarchy and how that affects the Black community. Like, so I'm sure that has something to do with that. I don't know if that's why per se I haven't gone into it. It's just, I think it's just a rabbit hole that I just haven't delved into. I think partly like there's a lot of things about me that I think when people expect them of me, I resist.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
That.
Like,
I get that.
Yeah. So I think that's in large part, a lot of the things that I don't know about Black culture has to do with that feeling. Like people think I should know this. They think I'm supposed to be like that. Watch me watch fucking 4 hours of Disney Channel.
That is so funny. No, I mean, I do want to say too that it's not that Black people don't consume Drag Race. I'm just saying that white women are like the largest demographic and they go to like DragCon and they're the most annoying, I guess. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it's definitely that. And also, I do think that Drag Race is actually, though, one of the most diverse shows on television. Like,
I
just
agree.
Consistently, and I mean, certainly not every race has been represented, but like, you're always going to see Black queens every season after season, which is like quite unusual, I would say.
I would say you see almost 50-50 almost every season.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow.
As for winners and things, but okay, we're getting to Drag Race. We have to talk about RuPaul.
Yes, RuPaul.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah. So I'm trying to think, what do I know? So RuPaul, before Drag Race, I feel like RuPaul was like in and out of my awareness. Like somehow there would be something like some show that like, that he was a part of, and then it was like for years not hear anything. Yes. And then all of a sudden Drag Race, it's like, nope, it's all RuPaul all the time,
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a reason for that, actually.
Okay. Ooh, I'm excited to learn
later. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Can you, before we get into that, can you take us back to like, I guess your first awareness of RuPaul?
So I think that at least, like Supermodel, his like hit song came out in 1993. So I would have heard like background kind of just like that song, I feel like, in pop music. But my real introduction was to Wong Fu, Thanks for Everything, Julie Newmar, which came out in 1995.
Oh, that's right. I love that movie.
Yes. And my mom, which is so cool in hindsight, like we used to watch that all the time. Like that. And I would have been like 10 years old at that time. Mm-hmm. And luckily my mom didn't have a problem with me watching that movie. And RuPaul is in that movie which I don't know if somebody's like made the meme yet, but she's wearing a Confederate flag dress and her drag name is Rachel Tensions.
Oh, that's amazing.
And I keep wanting to post like a picture of that and say, this is the only Confederate statue I want. But
yes,
I don't know if I'm late to the game or not.
I don't think you can get away with it. Like, I love you, but I don't think you can get away.
I don't think I can, but it is the best name, I think, in history. Yeah, and so she is in that. She was also in the Brady Bunch movie randomly, and
what?
Yeah, she plays like the guidance counselor to like Jan or something. It's just like she did these little like bit pieces here and there. But yeah, so I would have known her from that, and then of course the resurgence of like Drag Race. But what's interesting is that I actually kind of got back into her. And by the way, RuPaul is like, he jokes like, call me he, call me she, as long as you're calling me.
Yes.
So for pronouns, I just want to make that clear. But I got back into him mostly when, not just through Drag Race, but through like his podcast. Like I actually was like listening to RuPaul specifically before I was watching Drag Race. And that's how I feel like he kind of like re-entered the culture in a lot of ways. But yeah, so it would have been back then. I do remember, I mean, I just loved that movie. Tu Wong Fu is such a good movie.
Yeah.
And so like iconic. So yeah, that would have been like the first early days.
What about you, Paige? What was your first RuPaul?
I was aware of RuPaul in the like early 90s because at one point RuPaul had a short-lived talk show, I believe. And I remember my parents talking about that, but I don't think we watched it. And I had definitely heard some of his music. And then when I first moved to Los Angeles, my roommate and I lived in Culver City, and in order to afford our apartment, she worked at 3 different Starbuckses. And one of those Starbuckses, Ru was her regular. So, and it was while they were filming the first season of Drag Race. So Ru would come in and be like, this is what we're working on. I'm so excited about it. So when it came out, my roommate and I watched it together and we were obsessed with it. Now, he was working on shooting the first season, but the season we actually watched is season 2, which I'm sure Katie's going to cover at a certain point, because season 1 got like put in the vault and then came out later. So like he worked on this huge thing for like the whole time we lived there, and she, was working at that Starbucks, and then we finally got to see it on TV. So
what is Ru's drink?
I do not remember. It was like I want to say it was just like a basic latte. Like it wasn't anything crazy. It was pretty normal, and he was there every morning. So
I feel like every hugely successful person has some like boring drink without sugar in it, and I'm very upset about it.
I was gonna say, I would think it would be like the healthiest version, because he's always like very he's always talking about trying to fit back into his corsets or whatever, so I don't know. But yeah.
I do know that the reason he became like her regular is because no one else recognized him at the Starbucks. No one knew who he was, and she
that's so
clocked
funny.
him immediately and was just like, "You're RuPaul," and like from there they were like BFFs at Starbucks until she eventually stopped working at Starbucks. So yeah.
I'm so jealous. I have yet to see him in person, and it is like I have like 2 LA goals, and one is to see John Hamm at the grocery store because my friend did. And
only if he's wearing sweatpants.
Shout out to Rachel Friedland, who stood behind him at Albertsons. And, right? Yeah. And yeah, RuPaul and John Hamm are like, I can see them, and then I could move away from LA if I had to. I'm just saying. But yeah,
I do hear that he's incredibly nice. Is what she used to say, that he was very cool. So
yeah,
that's cool.
Which is part of why I love him, because I feel like, and mind you, like since the like success of Drag Race, there's like, he's had a share of like scandals or whatever. But what I've always or like really started to gravitate towards was like just his spirit, which is like so beautiful, and he's like so about self-love, and he's always been like that. Like that's not a new thing. Like from the beginning, he's like had a very consistent kind of like, if that's your brand. Yeah, I love him so much. So I don't know. Where do I start? What do I do? Like, how do I?
Yeah. Well, what are RuPaul's beginnings?
Okay. So RuPaul was born in 1960 in San Diego. And I already relate to him because I grew up half in San Diego. Basically the same person. And he was born, well, actually, no, let's back up. Okay. Ru's mother was from Louisiana. So literally like his mama, Louisiana. And she was told when she was pregnant with him that she was going to have a boy and he was going to be famous. and she made up the name RuPaul. So she named it after like Ru, like the base for like gumbo and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So his full name's RuPaul Andre Charles. And I found the quote. He said she would always say, he's going to be famous because ain't no motherfucker alive with a name like that.
She's right.
I mean, I'm already into it. Love it so much. He was raised like with all sisters. And he, but he was like from like a turbulent home. And so he, like in his teens, like went and lived in Atlanta with his, like his older sister who'd moved out by then. And that's where he like really started to feel like to be like artistic, and I think he went to like arts high school or whatever. But he always says himself that he always knew he was a star and he was going to be famous, probably because his mom told him that.
Yes.
And so he was in Atlanta for a while, and then he tried to move to New York. Now, I want to say, I love this theme about Ru is like, one, success coming a lot later than you think it's going to like come, and two, like trying shit that didn't work out and then trying it again and it actually did. Because I feel like a lot of points in his stories, I would have been like, I'm out, you know? But because he tried to move to New York, and he was only there for like 6 months. It was like a nightmare, and he like moved back to Atlanta, and then he like went again, and then he became like, you know, the star we love. But he started out like his drag beginnings was doing a lot of like, this was like, mind you, the 80s, it's Atlanta. He's doing a lot of like, they call it like gender fuck, kind of like drag. And I was reading up on this, which was really interesting. They were saying that like at that time, the only drag queens were like very like pageant queens, you know, and it's like Georgia. So they were kind of like Southern Belle, like very polished. And he was like half a mohawk, wearing high heels, like in kind of like punk band, whatever. And so actually the other queens were kind of like, you're sloppy. And he was like, I'm the future. But, you know.
And he was right.
Oh man.
And
that's what I say at work every day.
Yes, exactly. I am the future. Okay.
To my boss.
So at that time he was like doing that, and then he went to New York, and mind you, this was like, he was like a lot older than you'd think. Like I always thought he was like 19, 20 doing this stuff, but like by the time he was like in New York and things like that, he was like already 28. But he had kind of just moved city to city trying to make a name for himself. And another thing I love so much is like, he's so about self-love, but he's also very smart about kind of like branding and consciousness. And so like, he talks about how like when he was in Atlanta, he would like make posters that just said like, RuPaul is hot, or like RuPaul is everything. And he would just paste them all over the city, like just to be in people's like consciousness, or like kind of to be in the scene. And I was like, that is hilarious. Like, and it wasn't even necessarily like promoting a show. It was just like to do that. Like, can you imagine? I mean, the self-affirmation is like, amazing. And to just want to be in people's like minds, you know?
Yeah. I knew a guy who, he since passed away, R.I.P. But he was a very talented, very tall performer. And I'm forgetting his name right now, but on his business card, he had the quote that said, like, I don't know, let's say his name is James Johnson. Like, he had the quote that says, "Who is this James Johnson?" in quotes, and then dash Oprah. Like, I think at one point Oprah said, "Who is this person?" And he decided that's his resume and put it on all of his business cards.
I respect it. I mean, that's something I could never, like, I would shrivel, but that's hilarious. Like, I have such a fondness for people who have that much like bravado, you know?
Yeah.
I really respect it, because it is that idea of like, you have to believe it first, and you have to kind of make your own reality, and then you force everyone else to believe it. And that's like a lot of success in show business, I guess. But yeah, I just like love that. I think it's so funny, and I think that he's like brilliant. Also, just from a young age, he was always like, I'm gonna be famous, you know? So then he moves to New York, and he was like in the club kid scene, like the early 90s. And he realized too, like once he started dressing in drag, like the level that he or like kind of the character we know now, which is like this kind of like glamorous, like not the gender fuck like messiness, but this like totally crazy like glamour queen, that he was like, men, women, everyone was literally like, who the hell is that? Because that's the thing about him, is like, he's so gorgeous, like, and he's very handsome and so gorgeous. He's truly like a two-spirit god, like the closest thing we have, you know? And he's like, he's 6'5", so in heels, he's like almost 7 foot, Like, just, I mean, gorgeous, you know. And there is, if people want to see, there is like great YouTube footage of him in the 90s. Just like after he was like a go-go dancer or whatever, like there's just a lot of archive footage of him young on the streets, like going into a bodega and just like talking shit and like all this stuff. And you see like this just gorgeous young RuPaul on the streets of like New York in the like late 80s, early 90s. It's incredible footage. It's just like, I mean, it should be in the American Congress, of Library of Congress, whatever. But I love him. I just love him so much. He was also in the B-52's Love Shack video. Fun fact. It was like his first big break, because he was like friends with the B-52s, and they were like, let's get a huge drag queen in this, you know? But what I like is that, so he was in the club scene, but it like wasn't quite working out. And so when he was 28, he actually went through this like crazy life depression where he like moved to LA. He was like sleeping on his sister's couch. He was like, I didn't make it. I'm never going to make it. Like he kind of had this whole like, you know, what we would be like 30 some, like when you turn 30 crisis, return of Saturn, whatever, which he always talks about. And he was just like, I think I'm done. Like I tried so hard. I was like hoofing it for so long. And then he had friends that were like, what the fuck are you doing? Like just fly back. And he flew back kind of like with a renewed energy, and then like became like the queen. Like I think he won like some sort of like Miss Manhattan like 1992 or something like that, and was like the belle of the ball of all these like club kids. And so it was like around that time that then he was like meeting up with like, you know, his management, record label, whatever people. And then it was in 1993 that Supermodel was released, and he became the star that he always anticipated he would. And he was 33 when that was released. So again, I keep saying his age because I think it's like really interesting that it happened a lot later than he thought. And he's had these interesting like times of like not being around and then being around, you know? Questions, thoughts?
Because Paige, I know you're like a crazy like drag, like you have a fantasy drag, like what is it, a fantasy?
Oh, I was in a RuPaul's Drag Race Fantasy League, not the one sanctioned by VH1, like an underground Facebook league.
I love
this.
Like 151 underground.
Yeah, underground.
I had to explain to my boyfriend first what fantasy leagues were, and then what a drag fantasy
drag league was. Yeah, I actually, I'm pretty good at fantasy drag race.
Yeah, well, I remember one time we went to an open mic, and this guy was like, "Where are all the drag shows?" And then you went up right after him.
Drag shows in LA, and I was like, I need to tell you how stupid you are. Like there's not. Time is of the essence. I can't let you walk back out that door thinking your stupid thoughts. It's time for change. And I shouted drag facts at him for like 5 minutes straight.
Yeah, it was worth it. It was worth every bit of the $5 we paid at.
I got to
hopefully never
run
go to again.
No material. All drag facts. And then I roast battled a couple days later, and a girl came up to me. She's like, I know you shouted drag facts at that guy for like 5 minutes.
What was your fantasy league name?
Oh, I changed mine every season, but I had one that was the Tuckahoe Audubon Society. I played Hog Body of Lies a couple seasons in a row. It was a great one. I'll have to look back through. My favorite was Tuckahoe Audubon Society, and it would just be like Tuckahoe Audubon Society : looking for cocks in quotes. It was great.
Your government
great team name. Yeah, my government name. Mm-hmm.
Here's the question: when did you guys see your first drag queen in real life?
Ooh, I was thinking about this exactly the other day, where I had like a visceral memory of it. I couldn't have been more than maybe 9 or 10. I was very young. We had gone to see, I believe it was Wizard of Oz at a theater in Golden Gate Park, where there's like a theater district. And I remember we came out of the theater, and there was this woman in a green, like glittery dress. And I remember looking up and thinking like, holy shit, that's one of the most beautiful women I've ever seen. And why is she 7 feet tall? Just like, what? And I was like, my brain was blown away. And there was 2 of them. She had like a friend with her. And my dad was like, come on, let's go. Because it's like, and like as a kid, I did not understand. And as an adult, I realized it was almost midnight in the Tenderloin in San Francisco. And this was very likely a beautiful sex worker. And I had no idea.
I love that she's wearing green sparkles.
Oh my God, beautiful. I was like, she looks like the Emerald City. And
oh my God.
And they quickly whisked us away and had to explain to us later. They were like, no, that was actually a man in women's clothing. And I was just like, no, because it was too beautiful. But that was my first experience. I didn't have really a context for what it was at the time, but I vividly remember it. Yeah.
So
yeah.
sweet.
I don't remember mine. I mean, or at least not the first conscious one, because I've been to Disneyland so many times that I'm not sure. I'm sure I've seen many a queen in a parade and not have realized it. But I think probably I don't even know the first conscious time, because I don't know that, like, yeah. Well, I will say this, for my mom's, I think 61st or maybe 59th birthday, I don't know, one birthday, I took her to her first drag show.
Yes.
Yeah. And that was so much fun. And I think, I took a picture, and then I think I showed you, Paige, and you were like, oh yeah, that's blah, 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 blah from such and such season.
Yeah.
And I was like, yep.
Well, like my drag obsession goes to the point where I know local queens because I think they'll eventually be on the show. Like, I'm scouting. Like, I'm like one of those ridiculous football people that's like, yeah, people play college leagues, but I'm just like making the rounds at high schools. Like,
that's
yeah.
So that's
like, I knew about Valentina before the show.
Nice. Because that's a big complaint people have too, that they're like, are you a fan of drag or are you a fan of Drag Race? You know?
Right.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm curious about with RuPaul. Like, how does RuPaul transition into, like, not just being a queen, but somebody who is actually the facilitator between what the world knows about queens?
Yeah. Well, I feel like it was, so like his single Supermodel was like huge, which I found out too. Kurt Cobain said it was one of his favorite records of the year in '93. So,
oh, well, there you go.
Great record.
Ally Kurt Cobain, you know. There's also like, I've seen this, like, even before this episode, I had seen this interview before, but RuPaul on Arsenio Hall in 1983 is like the best interview. It's like the perfect late night interview, and you can see like Arsenio Hall is like truly enamored, because Ru is like hilarious, beautiful, being ridiculous, like, but being so sweet and like energy. It's just beautiful. And so I feel like Ru was definitely like America's first drag queen, like people like flocking, you know what I mean, like, or being like truly like in love with her. So she did that. She's like Wong Fu, blah, blah, blah. She was like popular in like the culture. Oh, she was also the first Mac girl ever.
Yes.
That's exciting. I knew she was like a Mac girl, but I didn't know she was the first. So that was like very cool. But so she like was kind of doing nightclub stuff, and then she kind of went away, which is, again, this is the weird thing, is like the second break. She took an 8-year break from show business.
Wow.
In her like 40s basically. And she was like, she was still doing like club dates, but she wasn't like trying TV show or whatever after the VH1 show too. And she worked in radio, but like she always says like she was kind of just like out of it, like didn't know. She was like, maybe I'll get my real estate license, like don't care. And that's like so crazy to me, to be in your 40s and like have been like this successful, you know, and to be like, fuck it. And then she pitched Drag Race to Logo, and like all these, of course it's hilarious, it's one of those great stories where like everyone was like, cute idea, gonna pass, and now I'm sure like all these networks would like die to have it, because it's like such an anomaly show, because it's the only show that like gets more popular every season it goes, you know. So yeah, she started Drag Race. We're on season 12 already, which is like crazy.
Wow.
And
All-Star season 5, yeah.
It was, so I think it was technically 2008 that she sold Drag Race. And then, like, when I was trying to think of like when I first heard about Drag Race. At the time, I do know that I legally downloaded episodes because that was like a hot thing to do. Remember when everyone was just like illegally downloading, which like we don't have to do anymore because of streaming, but it was like, oh my God, you know? And so I remember illegally downloading, no comment. But I remember illegally downloading the first season and loving it. But I feel like, I mean, for myself, I always just kind of like naturally love like whatever like gay stuff is in the culture or queer stuff is in the culture. I don't know why. I just always like, I don't know which came first, like my love of it or it, you know, I don't know. So I feel like that's when it broke. And then it was like season after season, it was just building and building until it became the RuPaul we know and love today, you know? Did you ever watch an episode, Crystal?
I did. So I tried to go back and watch whatever, at least what seemed like the first season on Prime. Mm-hmm. Amazon Prime, which I don't know. When's the last time you've watched the first season?
For me, it's been a long time.
Okay,
like years and years, and it did like it did disappear for a while, and also the lighting's crazy. All the queens say the first season was highly transphobic because of the lighting.
Okay,
yeah.
Because of the lighting?
Yes, because it was like truly a crime. It's insane.
It was also there was a they used a few terms in the first couple seasons that they have then now since retired that were transphobic. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I feel like there was something else about that. Oh yeah. Ru also prior to this had a famous appearance on Project Runway in which they did not light her well, and it's pretty crazy. But I'm sure she wants us all to move on from that. Yeah. It was just, it was wild.
Wait, what could you see, or what didn't look good?
It didn't look like RuPaul. It looked like it was like she didn't look good. That's all.
Yeah.
Like,
see, and this is actually a point that I want to bring up because I was actually talking about this with my boyfriend the other day. I was showing him these photos that I had taken like right out of college, and hashtag Black Don't Crack. I look pretty much the same like as I did when I first graduated from college, but I showed him these headshots that I tried to take to show him like, do you see how bad these look? And he was like, yeah, what is happening there? He's like, you've changed so much. I was like, no, this is, and then I showed him a photo of like literally a year later, and I was like, that's just 1 year later, or that's the same year. I look the same. I'm the same now as this. And I was like, I think there is something, and we've talked about this before, we're like, but I think it's even deeper. Like, you know, you have the ability to light based on who you expect, like who you're trained to be able to light. And then there's this other added layer of like, are you able to find beauty in the subject that you're lighting? Right. And that to me seems to be the key difference between when I have a good picture. Like, it's like, is this if it's a professional photographer, like, did this person see what's beautiful about me or not? And it's clear from these photos for me that look really weird. They're like, oh, this person doesn't find anything beautiful in me. Anyway, so that's why lighting is so important.
Yes, lighting is everything. I think Cher said that. I think Mariah Carey has like left an interview because she didn't like the lighting.
Oh, Mariah Carey will not show if they do not light her properly. It's like a thing. She also will shout at people on stage if she thinks they're singing her note, which is my favorite thing in the world.
But she'll do it that clip
in beat to the song. Just quit singing my note, and you're just like, fuck you better. Yeah.
Also, but like, not just think she knows they're singing her note.
Yes,
because she's fucking Mariah Carey.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think what's really interesting, as somebody who's been watching Drag Race for so long, makeup has evolved in the time that Drag Race has been on TV. And it is wild to watch the early seasons and see the essentially Herculean efforts that some of these queens had to put into getting a correct color for their skin tone.
Right.
And now they're just like whipping out the Fenty Beauty. It's like no problem. But like
it's light years.
Yes, like when they made fun of Coco Montrese for having tang skin, like that is her actively trying to light
She was very
balance.
orange.
She was very orange. She still is. I don't know why. I'm like, girl, they like foundation has changed. You can. I know CoverGirl doesn't cover boy, but like you've got options.
No, it is crazy. Like and it's funny because Rue is getting older, but the lighting is getting really good, but also like there's definitely some post-production happening. But she's like looking younger and younger. It's so insane. It is so
I
insane.
was watching the most recent season and I like for a hot second I was like, is this blurry? Where I was like, no, oh no.
A lot of Vaseline on the lens. No, it's true.
Soft focus. Okay.
It's very forgiving. I mean, it's pretty crazy too, because like when you, especially, we can talk about too, just the transformation of like RuPaul male to RuPaul female is like astounding. Because RuPaul will like as a male is very handsome, and like when he was younger, he was so cute, like just so sweet. And if you see like close up pictures, he actually has like freckles all over his face. Like he looks very, very different, which I think is very cool. It's very different than like the glamazon, vibe, which, I do also want to say that he credits his success, of like being a mainstream drag queen for like, he kind of went away from the like grimier kind of like club scene, like, and very much like sexual kind of like overtones. He says he like changed drag from sex to glamour, and that way like everybody could access it, and like moms and kids and everybody was like, it became like desexualized, which I think is a really interesting like approach, but it also worked because I mean she's really like truly a life size. She looks like a life size Barbie, like nobody else does, So I just think there's a lot of like little things like that maybe it was like premeditated, maybe it wasn't, but she's just so smart at like knowing how people like how she'll be perceived,
Who does RuPaul credit with like the sense of, I don't know, like the direction that I guess like her spirit has taken, because it's a very like inspirational person. Yeah. So where does that come from?
It's Diana Ross. Like RuPaul is to us as Diana Ross is to him. Because he's just all about like being a pioneer, not taking no for an answer, and I know that he's had like, there's been criticisms over his like not letting like trans competitors on the show and like using outdated terms and stuff, but I'm like, you cannot deny, I mean, he is like a 6'5" gay Black man growing up in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s as a drag queen. Like him breaking barriers is like, you cannot say he has not like taken one for the team, you know what I mean? And what's amazing too is like, even in that Arsenio Hall interview, he's even talking about facing the KKK at some like march recently. This was like in 93, and he's talking about like love and being like, and I just saw people on the other side that like are just like, very unhappy and like aren't living in love, and so even then it was like a very like, just, he was very forward thinking in just his actions and his life and his like spirituality and stuff. But yeah, I feel like Diana Ross is like his ultimate bitch.
And I do appreciate that he's willing to learn and change, because like, there have been trans competitors on the show. I think there will continue to be now trans competitors on the show, and they change the terminology. They're changing the show. I think it's a show that evolves, and I think at the core of it is RuPaul's tenet of self-love. I think that's the biggest thing. Yeah.
And I love too that he has always said like, because he always says, like it's a famous quote, like if you can't love yourself, how can you love somebody else? And he always says that like when he's saying that, he's actually saying it to himself first and like not just the crowd, so I feel like, we hear a lot of people be like, it's just like self-love, and I'm like, you're like a gorgeous, of course you love yourself, you know what I mean? But he doesn't necessarily, I mean, he's been open about that, about therapy. He got sober in his like late 30s too, and like I think that's when he probably had his like largest like spiritual growth. But something else that really always struck me that he talks about is like when he got famous and like kind of started to like pick up steam, that he really wanted to like bring his friends along from like the club scene, these like underground artists, and he talks a lot about how a lot of them were like so clinging to their identity as like a starving artist or like a certain type of performer they were, that he like lost a lot of friendships because people weren't willing to like let go of their own ego or identity to like kind of join him. And that was like very sad for him and obviously for themselves too. But he just is very, very thoughtful about like ego and identity and how these things can change. And I mean, obviously the nature of his work is literally like transforming, right? So it's just a big theme like that he preaches a lot that I really like, honestly, especially like early seasons of the podcast, like it would be my like self-help. I'd literally be like listen to an Oprah and then listen to him, and he's just so like positive and like just a very deeply like spiritual person. But I always I don't know, it's really astounding to me. I'm just always impressed with people who, one, know who they are totally unapologetically, do not change anything. And also, I mean, in some ways, like he's like a 7-foot black man walking around. Like it's not like and even he himself, I mean, he had faced, of course, plenty of like homophobia and stuff, but like he's just such an imposing force that like he couldn't hide if he tried, you know?
Yeah.
Like
here's my question. When I open my own zoo, are you guys going to be willing to abandon your identities as comedians and help me run said zoo? I just need to know now.
What animals, what department am I running?
Yeah, I'm only down if I can be like full blown Carol Baskins. Like, if I
yeah,
can go
absolutely. As long as I don't die mysteriously,
I can't guarantee that.
Well,
oh my god,
that's what makes it interesting, I guess.
For anyone.
I love it. Yes, I would be willing to let my ego go and.
That's really interesting. I mean, because I think as comedians, like we talk a lot about this. Like, I think is the current debate right now, kind of in that regard, is like, well, who's going to do Zoom shows, you know, like, or who's going to figure out like the internet in a new way, like who's going to figure out TikTok. And there are people that are like, nope, not doing it, and like there are people that are like, maybe, you know, like, and that's kind of, I mean, because there's money on the table in some ways when it comes to these other things, and it's like, it feels that debate to me is constantly interesting, as like who's going to be flexible with whatever the new thing in comedy is.
Well, that's the amazing thing about like Ru too, is like, as he says, like he's got more famous in his 50s than he was in his like 30, you know, like at the height. So he's like one of the few people that as he gets older, like continually is relevant, continually like comes up with new ideas. He's also, it just seems to me, he just is very hyper aware of like what's coming or what isn't like going to work with the culture. I feel like he's like kind of a conduit of like consciousness somehow. And so he knows like kind of at what stage, how far you can push things. And I think that that's so like incredible that he has like this huge show, and now he's going to be 60. Like,
does he think that Kanye will win for president? That's what I want to know.
I'm sure no. And also, we just need to say, like, you guys, Kanye's dropping an album. He gets manic. That's all this is. Like, we know this. Kim knows this.
I saw it online and I was like, again, man, it better not be gospel this time. Just like, he did so weird last time.
It's just, it's, you know, it's the cycle. We're all in, you know, the US of yay or something. I don't know. Anyway.
I have listened to his podcast. I really like it. I mean, so I kind of pick and choose between like who's the guest on there, like who I want to listen to. I listened to the Leslie Jones one, and what I love is that you can tell that the people that he's interviewing are so, they feel like they are the ones that are being, like, generosity is being extended to them.
Yeah.
Like versus them doing the podcast a favor by showing up. Like,
right.
Yeah.
He's always very like gracious. And I mean, he's so, I just love him. I'm like, I hate to just be like, I love him, but no, it's just because he has such a like spirit. It's like, he has a spirit you just like want to be around. He just seems very like magnetic and like gravitating and very like, I don't want to say like nurturing, but just very like supportive and sweet. It's very like, if you want to talk about safe space, I mean, Rue's presence, I imagine that's like what it feels like, you know?
How do you think you would react if you met in real life?
I honestly, I would try to be as like chill as possible, because I feel like he knows, like, at the same time, I know he gets like tired of like giving people that much energy. And he himself has said he's like actually like totally an introvert. He doesn't like to go out to parties. He doesn't like to socialize, which is funny that like most of his life was like being on acid in a club with like, you know, a million people around. And now he's like, I just like, he wakes up at like 4 a.m. every single day and does yoga. He's like very disciplined. I don't know. It just, but I would like not want to, I would just be like, good evening, sir. Like, I don't know. I just don't want to like get in his face too much. But I would love. I'm so jealous of anyone who has met him. Presuming they have a good experience, which I'm so glad, Paige, that your friend said he was like really nice.
Yeah, she saw him every day for like a year and a half. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like, I mean, like all celebrities, you just got to be like cool and like, you know, vibe it out. But I would just be like, I love you so much. Oh my god, like I don't know.
I feel like he's somebody who like Beyonce, like just emanates such a whatever it is that you would. I don't know if I'd be able. I don't know if I could predict how like I would react. Honestly, I remember somebody told me the story about like they like were catering an event and Beyonce was there, and like the woman just got near Beyonce and somehow like dropped something on her blouse, on Beyonce's blouse. You know, and just because she was near Beyonce, she just, you know, you don't know.
Oh my god!
And Beyonce said sorry.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it's kind of like I kind of feel like these people know like I'm doing this to you.
The power, yeah. She's like, this happens to me all the time. This is why I have an extra shirt. Like, it is so interesting. But at the same time, like especially as I get older, I try not to like mythologize celebrities, because they are like real people. And there's like, interesting, like Rue is also, he's a very unique person. Like I said, like he gets up at like 5 a.m. I've heard that he like doesn't eat in public. Like weird, like some stuff like peculiar things.
Oh, interesting.
Like he doesn't like dinner party. He hates dinner parties because he doesn't like to see people eat. Like he doesn't like people talking and eating at the same time, so he like doesn't do it in public. Some like just interesting lore stuff, you know. I do think another interesting thing about him is that like he hates Halloween. Like he doesn't celebrate it because he feels like you shouldn't need a holiday to like let yourself go. Like I live Halloween basically 24/7, and he's like I've heard him be like vehemently like, it's ridiculous, like why are we doing this, you know? And I'm like, it's fun. It's like the one day he's like, we shouldn't eat, you know. So I'm like, okay, that's a unique take we haven't heard before. Like,
now how does he feel about the movie Hocus Pocus?
Oh my god, funny you should bring that up. Funny you should bring that up. Okay, before he was famous, back in the 70s, he was like briefly home. He went to an all ages dance club in San Diego in the 70s, where on the dance floor he met Kathy Najimy.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
And they have been friends ever since. Like none of them were famous, none of them were pursuing anything since they were literally like 19.
Oh, I love that.
Listen to that. That's a great episode of the podcast too. But I was like, okay, that's also why, you know, like he's cool, because she's fucking cool, you know?
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy? Yeah. Small world.
That's so awesome. Mm-hmm. That's wonderful. Any other facts that like if somebody was interested in knowing more about RuPaul, where should they start?
That's a good question. His first biography is called Letting It All Hang Out, I think. And he just has his new book out, Guru. Paige, have you read Guru yet or seen it?
I've not read Guru yet. I have a copy of it that has been sitting on my desk. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, it's honestly, I feel like all those books are like the same vibe of like self-help, beauty tips, and, you know, like pop culture references or something. But I would say that, or just start listening to like the early podcasts. Honestly, that Leslie Jones episode is great, also because she's great on it. But yeah, I feel like his books, and then just look at like Google the old like footage again. You can just put like RuPaul Young or something. It's just really cool. Like he was so sweet. I just want to like squeeze him, because he was just like this young like artist kid, you know. But yeah, I just love him so much.
That's wonderful. I loved all of that. I was thinking about close-up pictures, and like he reminds me of like I guess like close-up photos that I've seen of like Malcolm X. Like that he has kind of what they would call red, like they would call, like that,
like Redbone,
like
or
in
like,
black. Yeah, like yeah.
I know what podcast I'm on. Okay.
Okay, so that's great. So I will put the link to the video that you referenced. And please send me that photo of Rachel Tensions.
Oh yes.
Oh my God, that's what Mississippi should have.
Truly, I mean, no one's talking about. I want to talk about it, guys.
That is so great.
Where can people find you?
I am at katyfrench.com. I spell Katy with a Y. Like that. Slut Katy Perry. No, I'm kidding. I got it. It's a call-out podcast,
Christian
right? I gotta
music
say it.
Artist of note.
Yes. Yeah, katyfrench.com. I have, all the stuff there. Catch my Zoom shows there.
Yeah. And just a cool heads up for listeners of the podcast. So this Friday, the Friday after this podcast, this episode airs on Earwolf. They're doing a series where they're giving the platform to Black voices and lesser known podcasts and podcasters. And our podcast, Black Card Rehab, will be in the inaugural episode, the inaugural day that they're having on Fridays for the next few weeks. So please look out for that. It'll be posted on our social media sites. And we would just love it even if you have listened to all the episodes, you've already binged them all, if you could just add another, drop in the bucket to listeners who are listening on that platform, because who knows, what could happen after they see the numbers. And but thank you everybody who's been supporting and listening and laughing and learning and loving and all the other L words.
Lauren Hill. No.
Lauren Hilling. I feel like what is it? What is it about God Bless the Dome page?
Oh, thank Jesus for the dome.
Thank Jesus. Now we got to thank Brother Anthony for the dome. All right. Thanks, you guys. We'll be black next time.